Existential OCD is a subset of OCD where persons are very preoccupied with philosophical aspects of life. They might have an association as to what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? If there is no God, why should I even care about anything? And so their brain generates these philosophical questions that create an illusion that they need to solve these questions in order to kind of move forward in an undistracted way. It's natural for us to look into topics such as meaning of life. For some people, it becomes a PhD in philosophy, and for other people, it becomes a cocktail party conversation. Persons with existential OCD, it's a moment-to-moment, day-to-day torment because their brain obligates them to solve these mysteries. And it obligates them on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis such that it creates a tremendous distraction, a tremendous preoccupation, and once again, hallmarked by tremendous emotional distress. So it's very different from a person's natural curiosity about answers about the universe versus a person with OCD's desperate need to bring to close these unanswerable mysteries. Common symptoms might be talking to a clergy, talking to family members, trying to gather reassurance that they've reached a legitimate conclusion. There's a lot of internet research nowadays that takes place in terms of finding websites about philosophy, about life's meaning. And so the idea that they can find an answer to shut off their brain's distress signal of being in a state of non-closure or non-conclusion is an endless pursuit. It's a desperate pursuit in order to find these types of answers. Common misunderstanding or misconception about philosophical or existential OCD is the idea that the person actually has these questions as an interest. These questions, like all subsets of OCD, are derived from the brain's energy signal. That's a malfunctioning part of the brain. The person is driven to find these answers only because of that signal. And it's interesting that when a person is in recovery, or if their brain shifts to a different topic, the person doesn't actually have any interest in talking about these topics because they were never of interest to them in the first place, typically. It's just that their brain chose the topic and that's what created the emotional distress and the emotional energy and priority to gain a conclusion to these topics. When someone has existential OCD, they can become very distracting to friends and family because it seems like these topics are the only thing that they want to ever talk about. It's very common that this topic will be mistaken for a legitimate concern since these questions exist naturally in our day-to-day living. It's really important that friends and family recognize the origin of this person's distress as not being about the authentic questions about philosophy. And so therefore, it's important that friends and family encourage the sufferer to not perpetuate these topics, these themes of philosophy and existentialism, and that the friends and family try to redirect the sufferer to topics that are much more familiar with their actual areas of concern and interest. This subset of OCD, I often encourage patients to create these questions that their brains are naturally creating and to carry these questions around with them on an index card, and that the patient might remind themselves on a once-an-hour basis through the index card and reading what their brain's questions have created and reminding themselves that they don't know why they're here on Earth, and that because they don't have that answer, they may never have another moment's peace in their life. And the idea of doing that type of an exposure, which is classic exposure and response prevention, shows their brain that the question is acceptable to exist in its non-concluded state. And through repetition and habituation, through repeated exposures, the brain dials back its desperate energy to get a conclusion on the topic. When OCD has calmed down, meaning that the person's brain is no longer sending out these emotional tsunamis of distress, a person can have these types of topics come up on their actual natural life radar and then not become overwhelmed with distress in order to gain a conclusion or to eliminate the question through research. So a person in recovery with existential OCD will just have, once again, their natural relationship with these topics and not have an overwhelming distress signal manipulating them to this endless answer seeking.